folks, welcome along to Percussion Discussion. Now, unusually, you can just see myself on the screen and not the person I'm about to introduce. And there's a good reason for this, and the fact is, the guy is an utter legend, easily one of the most influential rock drummers there has ever been. And as an extra little twist today, I've asked a few of my friends, drummers who I've interviewed before. I've asked them for a few questions. So you're going to be hearing questions from Mr. Steve Wight, Steve Gorman, formerly of the Black Crowes. Who else have we got? The #1 drum tech in the entire planet, Mr. Gavrilovic. And we've also got questions from Robb Reiner, the drummer from Anvil over in Canada. So who is it? This is a great one. We've got drumming royalty today. So please welcome Mr. Simon Kirke.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, the pleasure, trust me, is all mine, and I'm sure all the people who are going to watch this as well and thoroughly enjoy it. We don't see too much of you over in the UK these days, so it's great to see your face. And how's things going at the moment? It's a strange time for everybody.
Yeah, it's funny. I was speaking to Mick Fleetwood a couple of days ago, and he's saying, when we all get the green light to go out again, how are we is it gonna be like a lottery? Who decides who's gonna go first? And I said we should all go out on a package tour, like Fleetwood Mac, Bad Company, Aerosmith, Sting, that'd be one, and then U2, and then the Who and the Stones. It'll never happen, but I don't know when we're gonna go out, quite honestly. I don't know. Yeah. It could be a year. I mean, Sting's not going out till next year. I was speaking to him recently, and he said, I'm lucky because my tour was cancelled, but everyone kept their tickets for the European tour. But he's not going out till 2022.
Wow.
So we just have to wait and see. But I miss it very, very much.
Sure. But obviously, you're in your studio there. Are you managing to do much stuff yourself, writing and recording?
You know what, Matty? I've actually been really busy over the last, I would say, the last 9 months. I've done sessions with a lot of people, and oddly enough, there's a singer-songwriter. He's in FM. He was in FM, Steve Overland.
Oh, great voice, yeah.
And he hooked up with Steve Morris, fantastic guitarist, and Lone Rider. It's like a side project. I did an album with them in the summer. They sent me all the what they call the stems and the files, and I played. And then I'd done sessions with a guy in Turkey, a lady in Italy. I scored a movie in the autumn, an independent movie. I love writing music as well as playing drums. Yeah. So I've been pretty busy and just taking it a day at a time, really.
I think that's all any of us can do, isn't it? But it's great to have that facility. Can you imagine if this was, I don't know, 30 years, 20 years ago even? It'd be impossible, wouldn't it? We'd been.
Yeah, I didn't have, I just didn't have the finances to afford a house, a second residence, let alone a studio. It's not very big, by the way. This is only about 30 foot by 10. It's not a big place, and the house is only like 4 bedrooms. So it's modest, but it's really been my saving grace and an oasis right now. And I can make noise. I can play drums when I want, as long as the wife doesn't mind. She's used to it by now.
I think we all have that problem. Famous or otherwise, we all have that issue. So,
yeah.
Look, Simon, I'd like to go back to almost to the beginning, if you don't mind. I mean, I'm fascinated to know who your influences were as drummers, because you've influenced so many people. Who influenced you? Because it's kind of a funny time for the rock stuff wasn't really happening at that point, was it? You're one of the innovators of that.
Yeah, well, I started playing a drum, which my first thing was a little snare drum. When I graduated from little books and pans on my bed, and little sticks that I cut from a hedge are only about 6 or 7 inches long. This would be, I was 13, so it'd be 1962. And we were kind of in that transition. The Beatles hadn't quite arrived yet in '63 when they hit the scene. Obviously, everything exploded.
Yeah.
But you know, I think the first drummer that really got my attention, and I've never said this before. It's funny. It's such a good question. Would be Brian Bennett from the Shadows. And the Shadows were a really, really good band, and not just because they were Cliff Richard's backing band. Because Cliff, in his day, I believe he's 80 now. Cliff was a really, really good singer and a great performer, and he had this wonderful backing band, the Shadows. And I remember getting an album. I had a little downset a record player which had 45 and 33, and one of the first albums I got, LPs, was a one called Out of the Shadows, and Brian Bennett did a drum solo, and it really got my attention because I'd never heard drums played as a solo before.
Yeah,
but I have to predate this by a few months because I was brought up in a very remote part of on the Welsh border, near Craven Arms.
I know it well.
Yeah, it's good to be able to talk to someone who knows that area, because I have to tell Americans la 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 la. But it had no, our little cottage had no electricity or running water. So I was kind of starved for entertainment, although, you know, we made our own. But when we finally moved to Clun, which was 4 miles down the valley, we had a little council house, and we had our first TV. And just before I got this little record player, I was watching one of the first programs I'd ever seen on TV. And it was a program called All That Jazz.
Okay. And
it was featured big band jazz, Eric Delaney, Jack Parnell. And I believe the first thing I ever saw was Jack Parnell. Now, Jack Parnell was conducting, even though he was a very, very good drummer himself. But this drummer really caught my attention. I'd never seen anything like it before. I'd never seen drums played before, you know. And this, the way the guy was, you know, the cymbals catching the light, and then he did a solo and the sticks, and I was mesmerized, much more than trombones and the. So I picked up my mum's knitting needles and started, you know, trying to get a little rhythm going. And I believe that's when, you know, the lightning bolt and then I went up. But getting back to the people who started influencing me, I'd never mentioned Brian Bennett before.
Wow.
Because the normal, you know, Ringo, Charlie, they were influences on me because they were the generation before me.
Yes.
And when I started listening to the Beatles, 1963, it really got my attention because Ringo's such a good drummer. And I don't know. I'll tell you a little. When I got to play with him in the All-Star Band, I said, "What was one of the first exciting tracks you ever played?" He said, "Oh, She Loves You," because it starts with that little 5-stroke roll on the rack tom. I said, "That's such a great thing." He said, "I'll tell you a story. We were coming into Abbey Road, and the kids had seen it. You know, we had a little fan base back then, and they chased us into the studio, and we're going, oh, come on, hurry up. And we managed to get in. Mal Evans, the roadie, you know, like kept them out and kind of locked the door, and they jumped on they said, 1, 2, she loves you. And so it had that air of a frantic air about it, you know. She loves such. The Beatles played really fast tempos back in the day. Their songs were, well, he said they were all under 3 minutes, and they were all about love.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Ringo and Charlie were the first two ones that really got to me. The backbeat, and keeping a solid backbeat. And then I got into Otis Redding. Really got into black music around 1966, 67. And my governor to this day, my number one influence is Al Jackson Jr.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Feel. That is Feel. His name should be next to Feel in the dictionary, shouldn't it? Really?
Yeah. He had wonderful, and he played that jazz grip like Charlie did. Charlie's always played that jazz grip. And then the two drummers with James Brown. When I got into James Brown around about the same time, he had these two wonderful drummers, Clyde Stubblefield and Jabbo Starks.
Yeah.
And they played together, and I learned a lot from those two. In that, you didn't have to play loud. You know, even though I was a loud drummer in Free and Bad Company, I learned a lot from them because they had this wonderful jazz groove, but with a backbeat.
Yeah.
And you've only got to listen to Payback, Popcorn, Sex Machine, this wonderful popping, light jazz, you know, sort of with a jazz backbeat.
Yeah.
Loved them. Those two drummers were wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, some stellar names you've mentioned there. Now, look, obviously, I know you're a busy man. I don't want to keep you too long, so I'm going to just move along a little bit.
I'll give you a 10-minute warning.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, how did it feel the first time you got all four members of Free into the same room? Because you know, there was no weak links in that band, and I'm sure from an early age there wasn't either. How did it feel? Did you know straight away you were onto something?
Yeah,
it was the magic was there.
When I first hooked up with Paul Kotov, he was kind of the best guy in that band, the Black Cat Bones. I mean, he was, even though he was the youngest, he stood out. He was so good. And I joined Black Cat Bones, and I was with them for about 6 or 7 months. And then he told me about Paul Rodgers, that he met this great singer in a club, who was in a band across town in London, in a band called Brown Sugar. And he wanted to get together. And I took Paul's, I call him Cos, and Paul Rodgers I call Paul, because there are two Pauls, and yes. I don't want to get them mixed up. So I took Cos's word. He said, if Cos said this guy's good, it's good enough for me. So we went across town to North London, in this house, and this guy opened the door and ushered us in, and there was this big widths and basically a little band set up, and there was Paul Rodgers on a stool playing harmonica, you know, blues harp. Played very well. And then he started singing, Matty, and I went, okay, no, man, this guy, he was my age. I'm 6 months older than him. Yeah. So he would have been 19. And he was just unbelievable. And the way, we're in someone's house, we're playing in a house, and it's like apparent to me that this is going to be, I hope, if I got the gig, because a little aside, the guy who let me in the house was a drummer.
Right.
And he didn't know I was coming. He didn't know Cos was bringing me. He thought he was going to get the job. Not only did I use his house, use his kit, but I elbowed him out of a job, because the next day after we'd all played, you know, Cos called me and said he wants to form, you know, he wants us all, the three of us, to get a band together. Mm-hmm. So we found Andy through Alexis Corner. Yeah. And Alexis was like the Rolodex for all musicians in those days. And he said, there's this kid, this 15-year-old kid. I went, whoa, 15? He said, yeah, but you got to see him, because he's unbelievable. So we all went down to this club, and we saw Andy playing with Keith Hartley. Mm-hmm. And he was just stunning. He was just amazing. So the three of us are looking at each other going, wow, this guy. And we met Andy the next day, and he said, yeah, I'd love to jam. I'd love to jam with you. He was very cagey. He didn't say, yeah, you know, I'll join. You know, just see how it goes. And then we went to the Nag's Head in Battersea a couple of days later, and we just took off. And within half an hour, we knew this was going to be special. Mm.
I mean, it's a dream lineup, isn't it? It really is.
Well, no, I mean, it's not up to me to say there were no weak links, but And I'll tell you something, I never really reckoned my playing until a couple of years into free. I was very shy. You look at early stuff of me, and I'm like this. Because I was still learning, Matty. You know, I was still, we all were.
Yeah.
But I had a little inferiority complex at that time. I was still, you know, I'd just come down to London. I'd seen unbelievable drummers like Ainsley Dunbar. Oh, and I'm thinking, you know, these guys, everywhere I looked at the marquee, there was Blinky Davison with the nice, Carl Palmer with Arthur Brown. I mean, these guys were astounding. So I had this little, whatever the opposite of a chip on my shoulder was, one of those. But Paul Rogers and Paul Kossoff and Andy were just, for their age, they were just stunning.
I don't think it'll ever be repeated, that kind of quality. I really don't. I don't think. Honestly, I genuinely don't. Now, I've got some questions from previous interviews, or people have been interviewed by myself, who I know that your playing has influenced. I thought it'd make it a little bit interesting. And the former Black Crowes drummer Steve Gorman has given me a few, and these questions, there's quite a few, but they're all kind of around the same idea. And these are ones that I was going to ask, so I'm going to ask them now for you. And the first part of it is, how on earth did a bunch of teenagers understand how to leave so much space in their playing? Was it a conscious thing, or did they inherently just play like that? Was it just a natural thing? So that's one of Steve's questions.
That's a very good question. I think the first guy who, but my initial answer would be, look, we just played, honestly. And as I said earlier, I was still finding my own style. So if you listen to Tons of Sobs, I'm quite busy, especially my bass drum. You know, I'm trying to emulate Ainsley Dunbar. I had the backbeat, but it was still quite busy. So the one who first was like an antithesis to that was Andy Fraser.
Yeah.
All right now, he doesn't come in until the chorus.
Yeah.
And in fact, all the verses, he doesn't play bass. He doesn't come in until, and he was a very sparse player. We were all listening to pretty much the same kind of music. As I said before, I was into black music, soul, R&B, blues, and all those guys were. So yeah, I would say the architect of that simplicity would be Andy, and I kind of followed. Koss was, by his own admission, he wasn't a great rhythm player.
Okay.
You know, he because there was only one guitar, he had to do both. He had to play lead and he had to play rhythm as well. But he never rated himself as a great rhythm player. So there were gaps, you know, and it was just a way of conveying the music. Sometimes what you don't play is as much as, you know, what you do.
Exactly. It's as powerful as the notes you do. Yeah, 100%. And the second part of his question, it says, how does an 18-year-old kid figure out how to... sorry, I'll try that again. How does an 18-year-old kid figure out what everyone else takes years to do? Is it just natural again?
I think so, yeah. Look, my sense of timing, and I have a good sense of time, I will own up to, came from when I was learning the drums, and I went out with this guy, our local bus driver, our school bus driver, who had a little stack of 45s and a couple of turntables, and he went all over the area to these village halls playing different types of music to people who would dance.
Yep.
And he thought it would be a good idea if this little 14-year-old kid would bring his kit, set up next to the disco and play along with him. And I did that for nearly 3 years.
Wow.
So I developed about 2 years. So I developed this very good sense of time, because you had to be in time.
Yeah.
If you were playing to, you know, She Loves You or Satisfaction or the Supremes or some little country song or some tuba oompa, because it was the whole melange, a whole different type of music styles over those, 2 hours. So I had to be in time, and that really helped my timing. So in answer to Mr. Gorman, I think, you know, sit and play along with the radio with other people for 3 years, and you'll certainly get a good sense in that way.
That's a good answer. And the last part of his question, I think you'll like this. He says, where should I send the check for everything of his that I've stolen throughout my career?
Send for the RSPCA.
Oh, so that's...
Look, Keith Richards said a great thing to me. He said, look, we're just passing it on. Honestly, I'm happy that people have learned from me. I learned from other people, and I like teaching. I went through a phase when I did teach, and I'm just passing on what I know. And you know, I thank people like Ringo and Charlie and Al Jackson and all the people who influenced me. Levon Helm is a great. It's just, we're just here to pass it on to our kids, and they will in turn pass it on to other generations. So, but I thank Steve for those great questions.
Well, you know, he was a great drummer himself, so yes, absolutely. And he cites Al Jackson as one of his influences as well, so there's a common ground there. Right, I'd like to go to 1970 now, to the Isle of Wight. It's a little way back. I'm sure you've still got fond memories of that day, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I've got good memories. I mean, it's a great story in that All Right Now was climbing the charts, and so we were put on the marquee night, the Saturday night, and the Isle of Wight had been was touted as, you know, the English Woodstock, which had been this world-changing event, and it was a superb lineup, amazing lineup,
incredible.
And I've got a poster of it in my basement next door. So we were the flavour of the month, and they put us on the Saturday night. And Chris Blackwell, who was our manager, head of Island Records, came with us, obviously, because we knew there'd be a lot of people. We had no idea how many people there would be, because the gates had been broken down, the fences had been broken down, people had poured in, and they weren't going to pay £3 £3 to see 30 of the greatest bands on the planet. So, all right, we got there about 4 or maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We were supposed to go on at 7. So we got there early, and there were all these little caravans backstage, and everyone got in and were waiting for our turn. So we had a little smoke, had a little drink, a little smoke. Someone kept coming up to us saying, oh, they're overrunning. You know, you're going on at 8, then you're going on at 9, and we're going, oh, Jesus. So come 10 o'clock in the evening, Chris Blackwell said, you're not going on. You're going to go on tomorrow morning. And we were kind of disappointed, but I could see the wisdom, because we were frankly, we were a little bit out of it, having had a little sip and a little whatever. And we were really not in the condition to play what would be the biggest gig of our career. Yeah. So we went back to the hotel at the other end of the island and flew in the next day by helicopter. And I believe we went on about 11:30. Beautiful Sunday morning, the sun was up. People were coming out of their sleeping bags, you know, out of their tents, and started. When we played All Right Now, I mean, it just went crazy. So it was a wonderful experience. I was as nervous as hell. I'd never seen a crowd before or since. And we had no monitors in those days.
Oh, dear me.
Can you believe that? There were no monitors on stage. We just played with the amps. We had the amps angled in a little. And that's how we listened to each other. Because
there was apparently, I know it's a guesstimate, but they reckon about 600,000 there or something like that.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to estimate, but I heard 500,000. Yeah,
that's a lot of people.
Really know, but yeah.
It just shows you how spoilt bands are today with in-ear monitors, with so no monitors. Can you imagine?
But it's funny. I learned a valuable lesson because I went crazy. I mean, I was number one. I was nervous, and I hadn't done. I didn't start doing exercises until way into my career, like breathing exercises. So by the second song, I was red-faced. You can see it on the video. I'm out of breath. I'm sweating. And I remember years later, went on tour with Traffic, Free, and John Martin. It was an Island Records package, and Traffic had employed the Muscle Shoals rhythm section to play.
David Hood.
For some weird reason, wanted to sing and not play drums. And I remember watching Roger, and he had a little jazz grip, small kit, and he just had this wonderful. He didn't lift the left hand more than 7 or 8 inches from the snare drum. And I remember going out into the back of the arena, Madison Square Garden, and everything was wonderful. So I'd only wish that I'd known that it's where you hit the drum and how you hit the drum. You don't have to come back here to make it loud. You just have to, it's like casting a rod.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, but that was the Isle of Wight.
Amazing. Well, this leads to my next question. Now, I think you know Yard Gavrilovic, one of the finest drum techs in existence, and his question is, do you know what happened to the Hayman gold ingot kit that you used on that festival?
Yes, I do. And here's a strange story, one of the weirdest stories. It ended up in Paul Rogers' house. He's got a little house in Surrey, and there's a garden shed where Bad Company under the first rehearsal. And unfortunately, it languished there, and it kind of got rusted. And I was looking, it's gone. I mean, it's not around anymore. But here's the weird thing, Matty. During that week that I got hold of Paul and his son Stephen, who was living at the house, I said, you know what happened to that lovely Hayman kit? And he sent me some photos of it, Stephen, and it was gone. And this is I swear to God, I'm looking through Modern Drummer, just because I like reading drum magazines, I'm sure you do.
Yes.
And blow me down, in the for sale section is gold Hayman kit. Now, this is within 2 or 3 days of me getting these. And I'm like, what? 22 by 14 bass drum, all the drums that I had just lost.
Yeah.
Only trouble was it was in Sweden. I didn't care. I mean, I emailed the guy. He sent me photos. It was the exact same kit that I just lost, So I had it shipped over, and it's next door. And
well,
that's what happened to that lovely kit, and I love that gold Hayman kit.
Well,
great I ever had. Do you know anything about them? Were they made, or were they English?
Well, yeah, I think I'm pretty certain they were English, actually. But I've got some news for you regarding that kit. It was a kind of a double-edged question, if you like. I spoke to Yard about it, and he said, first of all, pass on my regards, hope he's well, which I've just done. And that drum kit, that gold Hayman kit, is actually with Yard at the moment. Paul has given it to him to make it like new again. So I thought you'd appreciate that, and Yard did as well.
Made my day.
So I'm sure Paul will provide the pictures for you.
I told him to chuck the bloody thing, because all I could see was, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the underwater photos of the Titanic.
Barnacles.
It was so corroded. Oh. You have to give me Yard's details, because I definitely want to get in touch with him. That's great news, Matty. Thank you very much.
So I think he was quite pleased to tell you that one, as I am as well. It's nice to pass on good news, isn't it? So, I mean, it's a bit of it's like a national treasure, that, isn't it, really, for drummers?
For me. Because it was with Free. I started out on a Ludwig kit, but Hayman lasted with me through Free's best years, actually.
Great drums.
To Paul Rogers up in Surrey. But I'm so glad it's...
That's good news, isn't it? It's always nice to have a bit of nice news on a Friday. Well, look, I've got some more questions for you. Now, another huge fan of yours is a friend of mine from Canada, Robb Reiner, who plays drums for the Canadian heavy metal band Anvil. Massive fan of yours. You're a big influence on him. And he's given me a few questions. And the first one, and I get why he's asked this one, how many takes did it to nail Mr. Big? Can you remember?
Well, back in those days, we never did anything more than a few takes. Because we played so many clubs and we interspersed a lot of our sessions with gigs. when we arrived for a recording session, we were pretty match fit, if you know what I mean. And Mr. Big it was a tough song to play. Number one, because it starts off in that really slow, to play that slow is very difficult. And then of course it doubles up, and then Andy does his amazing bass solo. Honestly, I don't remember, but I doubt that we would have taken it more than 3 or 4 times.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you must have been match fit then, because it is an epic of a song, isn't it?
Yeah. It was trying to figure out what to do in that in Andy's solo, quite honestly, because of course he's just playing E to D, E to D. That's the whole thing. And then he just takes off on these triplets. And I'm going, well, maybe I should do 16s on the bass. No, that's not going to work. Maybe 8, so I had to kind of experiment until I finally got what ultimately became Mr. Big.
And another couple of questions. Did you ever use Click for any free recordings, or was it all just live, totally live?
Not for free. In the early days of some of the Bad Company albums, we experimented because we were using those dreaded synth things. And I worked with them. I'd say, all right, give me 4 bars and then take it out. Yeah. Because if you want the tempo set, all right, we'll do that. But I don't want it, because it impedes your fills. You can't play around a click if you're doing fills. It's so... No, with an asterisk. Yeah,
but I think that question itself is a credit to your great timing, which we've already talked about. So I think if you're giving the impression you've got a click, then that can't be a bad thing. And one more, I believe, from Rob, and that is, it's quite an interesting one. What snare drum did you use on Tons of Sobs? Can you remember?
That would have been I don't know, quite honestly, it was my Ludwig kit, which was a super classic. Yeah. And I got it only because Ringo was playing Ludwig. So whatever that particular snare came with those 4 drums, but I can't tell you it was a super classic or I know it was 14 by 5.5 with wires on the bottom. That's all I know.
Right. So. Well, it's a great sounding album, full stop. Anyway, so it's So
we just played our club set basically.
How times have changed now, though. Different snares for this, that, and the other, and things were more simple then, weren't they?
There's more than one snare at a time. I've got the Black Beauty, Ludwig Black Beauty, which has been on every Bad Company song ever played. Yeah. And that's kind of a treasure to me. Obviously, Steve Jordan, who I know pretty well, has several snares. He has, they look like a tom-tom with snares on the bottom. He has a piccolo snare. He has this snare and that, and then he'll, depending on the song, he'll change it. Not for me. It'll all sound the same anyway for me. Yeah, well,
the thing is, once drums get over a certain standard, they all sound great, don't they, generally, especially with some tweaking in the studio and, fabulous stuff. So moving on again, obviously Free and No More, I guess, I don't know the exact year, was it 73?
Yeah, Bad Company was formed. Well, Bad Company was conceived in the autumn of 73 with me, Paul and Mick Ralphs from Mott, and then Boz Burrell joined just at the end of the year, I believe, or maybe the first month, January 74. I'm not quite sure.
That's another strong lineup, isn't it? You've gone from. Did it feel? I don't mean did it feel the same, because obviously you've got 2 different members. Obviously, having his signature vocal sound, that didn't change, did it? Paul is Paul. He sings how he sings, which is pretty fantastically. Did it feel very different?
It did. It felt great, quite honestly. The last 12 or 18 months of Free was a real slog. We were trying to deal with costs and his illnesses, and then we had got another guitar player and to go out and honor these tours. We went to Japan. Paul Rodgers played guitar. It was a really shifting sounds time for Free. So when we got up, we hooked up with Mick Ralphs, and Mick had been playing in Mott the Hoople on his final tour,
Yeah.
with Paul Rodgers opening
Right.
with his band Peace. And
Yeah.
they formed this friendship during the however many shows they did around England. They they jammed together in the dressing room. And at one point, towards the end of the tour, Mick said, "You know, I got this song, and Ian Hunter doesn't want to do it."
Mm.
And he had a little reel-to-reel, and he played it to Paul, and it was "Can't Get Enough."
Oh.
Paul said, "This is a hit, man. This is amazing." So when Mott the Hoople finished that tour in late '73, he got together with Paul, and they started writing together and just hanging out at Paul's house down in Surrey. And I called Paul up. I've been down in Brazil for a few months. And he said, "Hey, I'm working with this great guy. He's a lot of fun." So, I mean, long story short, it was a relief to play with someone who, Mick was not the genius that Cos was. No. Cos was one of a kind, but Mick was funny. He played really well.
Yeah.
I didn't want to work with geniuses anymore. They're hard work. And I loved Cos, and I was torn up when he died. And he was my little brother in a way. I loved him, but oh my God, it was hard work.
Yeah.
So when the four of us got together, number one, we were all in our mid-20s. Boz was a little older, I think. We were veterans.
Yeah.
You know, we'd come from three very well-known bands. We'd been around the block a few times, and we met up with Peter Grant and Led Zeppelin, and we had this amazing, perfect storm. So we just took off, and we were happy as pigs in shit.
Really?
Great time.
And again, great songs. I mean, you know, the back catalogue now, you look back, I mean, the free back catalogue is impressive, but you look at Bad Company, obviously I know it's been, you know, it's still an ongoing thing as well. And
it is.
Yeah. So, you know, it's incredible. It really is. Now, I've got another question from Robb Reiner for you. And this is an interesting one. I know which my answer is, but which Bad Company record of the first three is your favourite, if you're allowed to have a favourite, of course?
Oh. Straight Shooter.
Same as mine, that's okay, yeah.
There's several reasons. I mean, the first album really should be my favorite. And I guess in a way, on a certain level it is, because it was our first. So it was just something about it. But the Straight Shooter was, we kind of ramped it up a musical notch. You had Feel Like Making Love, you had Shooting Star, Good Loving Gone Bad,
Yeah.
Weep No More, which I wrote, and I'll always be grateful for Paul for singing that. It was a beautiful song. It just kind of showed that we weren't a flash in the pan, because the first album, Bad Co, here we were, you know, this was our calling card, and okay, can you follow it up? And we did it. We followed it up very well.
It's a very mature sounding album, isn't it?
Say again?
It's a very mature sounding album, if you like. And I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how we did it, because we had a lot of fun making it. We were all drinkers back then. I mean, we were young, and we drank, and we smoked a bit of dope, like a lot of people did and still do. But it just showed that we were not a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
And the cover was great. Everything about it was great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Fantastic stuff. And it's a great story to hear. You know, as I say, over in the UK, we don't really hear that much from you these days. So I've made it my mission to get this out and
I'm glad.
Get it out to the people.
Very much.
Well, it's my pleasure. Now then, I'd like to jump forward a few years. Obviously, you mentioned Ringo Starr before. You've done a few tours with Ringo. And another UK drumming legend is Mr. Steve Wight, a good friend of mine. And he's sent a question over, and it says, I'd like to know, how was it playing as the drummer in Ringo Starr's band? And it says, thank you very much for the inspiration as well, Simon. So there we are. That's
it was great. And when I got the call I did my first tour with Ringo in '96, and I got the call from him. And my daughter, who's now a grown woman with kids of her own, but she came to me in my study and said, "Yeah, Ringo's on the phone." Yeah, right. I thought someone was playing a trick on me, but I've been doing these rock and roll fantasy camps as a teacher, and the guy who runs them was also Ringo Starr's promoter.
Okay.
And Ringo had just he'd done about 2 or 3 all-star shows since '94. Anyway, he said, "Hey, Simon, how are you, Lana?" He said, and he never beats about the bush, Ringo. He's great. He said, "You want to come on tour with me?" I said, "Yeah, okay, I'd love to." You know, Bad Company weren't doing anything. And I'd just come out of rehab. And, you know, Ringo is in the program. And so he said, "Well, how do you feel about playing sober?" No. Well, let's give it a shot. And he said, "Great. Now you have to sing 2 songs. What are you going to sing?" The Liverpudlians. I detect a northern accent from you. So maybe, I don't know if you're from that area, but he certainly did not beat around the bush. He said, "What are you going to sing?" And I need to tell the others. Okay, so I thought, well, All Right Now. Yeah, good. Shooting Star. He said, "I never heard of it." Okay. Well, it's a good song, Richie. It's a good song. So anyway, bottom line is I flew out to LA where the band were, and I was nervous, Matty. Obviously, I was nervous.
Yeah.
There was his kit with the star on the bass drum and purple glitter and whatever. And I had a DW kit next door.
Yeah.
Next to his. So we got up, and I forget our first song, but we meshed pretty well straight away.
Oh, amazing.
The only thing we had to sort out was who was going to take the first fill, and then we'd alternate.
Yes.
So we never once clashed, you know, because I learned from him.
That must be a massive, what's the word I'm looking for? A big help, if you like. If you know, if Ringo was one of your influences, knowing what he's going to do, probably when he's going to do it, that must have helped a lot, I'd imagine.
Well, it was, but I don't know if you knew this, but he's left-handed.
Yes, yes.
But he plays a right-handed
Yes.
kit. So when he leads around the kit, he leads with his left.
Yeah, that's confusing.
Yeah, that is. I mean, thank God he wasn't playing a left-handed kick, because when face like this, you know. In terms of, and he was good, because in terms of, like, when we did Shooting Star, and I played the full kit, he played brushes, and he did a little run pattern. Johnny was a schoolboy when he heard his first Beatles song. He didn't play, you know, what I played. So he was very savvy in what he wanted to play, what he didn't want to play.
So
when
when you sang your 2 allocated songs, you were sat at the kit playing them. You were.
Yeah.
Wow. Right. Okay.
Well, I did that before. One of my first bands, I was a singer in a Heat Wave, and I had this. There was no boom stands, I don't think, because the mic came up through my legs. The big, I don't know, the Griffin, called Griffin mics.
Right.
How can I remember that 55 years ago? And yet I don't know what I had for lunch. So I sang a little bit, but look, when you think about it, when we're playing, we're projecting, we're breathing a lot more than, let's say, a guitarist or bass player or keyboard player. So when it comes to singing, it's actually not as difficult as maybe you might think. Where I had to be careful was the positioning of the throat. Yeah. Because if the mic was here, you know, you're constricted, and if it's down here, you're constricted. So it had to be spot on. I did screw up a couple of times in the early shows because I didn't do vocal exercises. Right. Peter Frampton taught me some great vocal exercises, and I managed to get through.
And of course, sitting down as well doesn't help, does it? You know, when you're trying to project a vocal.
Not really.
No. And did you say Can't Get Enough was one of the other ones you did?
No, All Right Now and
All right now.
Shooting.
Okay, I was going to say, because I can imagine, I sing as well, but I tend not to match the two. I do both to a reasonable level and put them together, they're terrible. And if I try and play a shuffle, I end up singing the hi-hat part almost, so I've given up on that totally. So I was just wondering how you got around that, but there we are. You must have a great range, because, I mean, All Right Now is not an easy song to get through, is it?
It's not. It's actually not, and you can only do it in A major. You can't do it in any other key.
Yeah, because the chord positions are, yeah.
That's just the soul of any song is the key.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, it's all turned off. But when we were Play Company, for instance, right, it's in E flat. Excuse me, E flat minor.
Yeah.
So you've got this. You try and do it in any other key, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't sound the same.
Yeah.
So when it came to doing All Right Now, I knew that I was going to have to, whatever A is, you know, I had to try and copy what Paul was doing.
That's
and I did, you know, I kind of strained my throat first couple of shows.
Yeah.
So Peter took me aside and say, listen, you got to, this is a muscle here, and you got to exercise it before you can start singing those high notes. And I got through the rest of the tour.
How did Paul? It was a slight a side thing here, but did Paul ever struggle? Because everything I've ever heard him on live has been spectacularly good. Did he ever? How do you sing like that and never have any issues? I mean,
never. I hear him now. I think the last few years of his career, he's been doing warm-ups, but very seldom. He's just a natural. Yeah, I mean, he hits some notes that fucking dogs go. What?
Yeah. Did you know there's a few singers, and you've mentioned another one, Steve Overland, who I think is one of the finest voices that's ever been. I mean, I remember
he does all his own harmonies.
Does he?
He's a fantastic singer. Yeah.
I heard FM once, and I stood open mouthed for about half an hour. It was just like, what am I hearing? You know, and obviously Paul Rodgers. I'm a fan of David Coverdale as well. You know, but you've worked with some great singers, you really have. And so look, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I can't thank you enough for doing this, Simon, and thank you for, you know, for everything you've given us drummers and musicians over the last, I don't know, however many years. It's given us so much, and we're all pinching little bits from you here and there. So thank you. That's all I can say, really.
Like I passed it on, and thank you, Maddie. It was a great. That was the longest half hour I ever ran, I think.
Sorry, yeah, I'm known to go over a little bit. And that's the problem when there's so much to talk about. It's you know, it's amazing.
If you think of anything else, just drop me a line and I'll try and help you. But that was a great interview. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you.